In a tall apartment building in New York, a young girl named Aurora is terrified to go to sleep because she believes a monster is hiding under her bed. When Aurora screams, her parents rush into her room. She desperately warns them not to touch the floor, insisting that if they do, the monster will eat them. Her parents reassure her that there is nothing in her room and eventually leave. Unable to sleep, Aurora decides to sleep outside her bedroom. She cautiously peeks back inside and spots a bunny made out of dust. Closing her eyes, she makes a wish, and suddenly, a glowing firefly appears. Curious, Aurora follows it through her apartment building until it leads her to one of the mailboxes. Then, once she catches sight of the mailbox's owner, she begins to follow him. The man exits the elevator, and Aurora does as well. She realizes that the man is her neighbor. Later that night, Aurora secretly follows the neighbor through a narrow alleyway. Sensing someone nearby, he suddenly turns, and Aurora quickly hides. She continues trailing him all the way to Chinatown, where a lively festival is underway. Along the way, Aurora finds a mask and puts it on. From the rooftop of a nearby building, she watches as the neighbor engages in a brutal fight with a dragon. After an intense battle, the neighbor defeats the creature. Aurora follows him back to their apartment building. After the neighbor enters his apartment, Aurora returns to her own, where her parents scold her for leaving without permission. The neighbor quietly watches the confrontation from his doorstep. Minutes later, Aurora's parents try to calm her, once again assuring her that there is no monster in her bedroom. Her mother gently tells her to stop sucking her thumb. Then they say goodnight to Aurora. But Aurora responds by saying, "Goodbye, Mom and Dad." Soon after they leave, Aurora hears a creaking sound beneath the floorboards, followed by her parents' screams. The next morning, Aurora wakes up to a silent apartment. Careful not to touch the floor, she uses an ottoman to move across the floors while calling out for her parents. There is no response. Night eventually falls, and Aurora returns to her bedroom, again using the ottoman to avoid the floor. She jumps onto a shelf, but a grape falls to the floor. She manages to climb onto her bed, only to accidentally drop her shoe. A low growl echoes from beneath the floorboards. Horrified, Aurora watches as the creature grabs the grape, then violently spits it out, smashing a lamp. She throws her blanket over the opening, but it is quickly sucked inside. The creature then shakes her bed violently, throwing it from side to side and trapping her. Suddenly, it stops and retreats. Aurora wakes up the next morning believing it was all a nightmare, until she notices the broken lamp. Later, Aurora goes to church. As people pass around the donation plate, she waits until it reaches her. Then she grabs it and runs back toward her apartment. An hour later, the neighbor checks his mailbox and finds several letters. One of them is signed by someone named A. He returns to his apartment and reads the letter. Learning that the writer is trying to hire him as a hitman, he pulls out a stack of cash and begins counting it. A knock interrupts him. When he opens the door, he finds the girl from the opposite apartment standing there. She asks if the money is enough. He goes back inside and resumes counting the cash. He asks for her name. "Aurora," she replies, then asks for his name in return. He refuses to answer. After counting the cash, he says it amounts to roughly $300 and asks where she got the money. Aurora replies that she stole it from the church and asks if it is enough to kill the monster. Confused, the neighbor asks how she knows he kills monsters. Aurora explains that she saw him slay the dragon in Chinatown. He asks her to explain further, and she describes watching him slit the dragon's belly. The neighbor dismisses her story, telling her she imagined it and insisting that monsters do not exist. Aurora, however, firmly disagrees. He then asks Aurora if she told her parents that he kills monsters. Aurora quietly replies that the monster ate her parents. The neighbor then asks Aurora to show him where the monster is. Aurora leads him to her apartment. Along the way, he asks what she was doing while her parents were being eaten. Aurora replies that she was hiding under her blanket. She takes him into her parents' bedroom. The neighbor looks around and points out that there should be blood if monsters ate her parents, but Aurora explains that the monster doesn't leave anything behind. It eats people whole. As he continues looking around, the neighbor notices a bullet casing on the floor and pockets it. Then, seeing the long claw marks etched across the furniture, the neighbor remains doubtful and asks Aurora how her parents could have died so violently without anyone hearing them. Aurora replies, "It eats everything, including their screams." He suggests that she should go to the police, but Aurora says she doesn't know how to explain her situation to them. With a weary sigh, the neighbor tells her that he never killed any monsters, or anyone. He asks why a monster would want to kill her family in the first place. Because they walked on the floor, Aurora answers. Calmly, the neighbor tells her that the monsters he knows do not kill people simply for walking on the floor. He then tells Aurora that she should leave. Later, the neighbor meets with his handler, Laverne, who manages his work as a professional hitman for hire. He shows her a photo of Aurora's parents and asks if she recognizes them. He explains that they were his neighbors and that they were professionally disappeared. Not a single drop of blood left behind. He adds that their daughter thinks they were eaten by a monster. Laverne raises an eyebrow and asks, "So, you're looking for a monster?" The neighbor replies that the monster was actually looking for him and broke into the wrong apartment. When Aurora's parents saw it, they were killed. Since the girl didn't see its face, the monster let her live. Laverne says she'll look into it, but admits she's more concerned that the girl has seen his face. The neighbor firmly responds that he will not kill the little girl. She's already in danger because of him. Laverne simply nods. Night falls. The neighbor hears the elevator ding and immediately realizes what is happening. He breaks into Aurora's apartment, warning her that the monster is coming, and tells her to hide inside the closet. He then waits for the assassins Laverne has sent to kill the girl. Though he drops his knife, he manages to fight one of the assassins. After a brutal struggle, he takes the attacker down but loses consciousness in the process. Meanwhile, Aurora hears her bedroom window creak open. Another assassin fires at the bed, then spots her hiding in the closet. Aurora braces herself for death. Then she hears a deep growl, and the sounds of the monster devouring the assassin. Eventually, the neighbor regains consciousness and rushes to Aurora's bedroom. He asks if she is all right. She nods. He then asks if anyone else was in her room. She nods again. The neighbor assumes the second assassin must have escaped through the fire escape, but Aurora simply tells him that she was eaten by the monster. Confused, the neighbor asks where the monster is now, since he's standing on the floor and it hasn't killed him. Aurora whispers, "It's eating now." The neighbor checks the hallway outside and then looks under Aurora's bed. Finding no sign of the creature, he pulls suitcases from the closet and drags the dead body into the bathroom. As he prepares to dismember it, Aurora startles him by asking what he is doing. He explains that he is draining the body's fluids so that cutting it into pieces will be less messy. She asks why he needs to do that. He replies that he has to get rid of the body. Aurora suggests leaving it in her room so the monster can take care of it, but the neighbor shakes his head. When she asks if she can watch, he firmly says no. When he is done, he asks Aurora if she wants to help wrap the pieces. She agrees. Curious, Aurora asks who the dead man was. The neighbor tells her that he was a killer. She asks if the killer came to kill the monster, but the neighbor, having had enough, bluntly tells her that her parents were killed, not eaten by a monster. Aurora then asks the neighbor if someone cut her parents into pieces as well. He shakes his head and explains that there was no monster in Chinatown. Those were men. He tells her that a monster didn't kill her parents. They were killed by men who were trying to kill him. Aurora tells him to stop making up stories to make her feel better, insisting that her parents were eaten by a monster. Suddenly, there is a knock at the door. The neighbor opens it to find a woman who introduces herself as Brenda from childcare services. She says they have an appointment. The neighbor replies that it is not a good time and comments on how difficult parenting can be. Brenda nods and adds that it is especially hard when you are a foster parent. Regaining his composure, the neighbor improvises and says, "Yes, we are the first family to come into her life since what happened." Brenda corrects him, "You are the third family." Unsure how to respond, the neighbor coughs, says he is feeling unwell, and promises to reschedule. Once she leaves, the neighbor realizes the woman is clearly not a social worker. At the same time, Brenda tells her partner that the man is definitely not Aurora's foster father. The neighbor asks Aurora if this really was her third family. She nods, explaining that the monster ate all her previous families. He asks where the monster came from. "I wished for it," Aurora says, "on a shooting star, just like I wished for you to kill it." Curious, the neighbor asks her why she would wish for her parents to be eaten by a monster. Aurora explains that her birth parents were not kind to her, though she later regretted wishing them gone. The neighbor asks if all of her parents were unkind. Aurora replies, "Some of them were." Confused, he asks why the monster would eat the nice ones. Aurora explains that the monster is trying to eat her because she is wicked and does not deserve a family. The neighbor gently reassures her. He tells her he has seen truly wicked people, and she is not one of them. He then asks where the monster is now. Aurora looks around and explains that the monster sleeps under her bed during the day and only comes out at night. She begs him to help her. When he asks if she ever wished for the monster to go away, Aurora says she did, but it didn't work. The neighbor then asks where she would go if the monster were killed, and whether anyone would miss her if she disappeared. Aurora answers no, explaining that everyone who might have cared for her was eaten. She then asks him whether anyone would miss him if he were gone. The neighbor remains silent. Aurora softly adds that she would miss him. That evening, the neighbor meets Laverne at a restaurant, carrying 2 suitcases. He explains that one contains the body of an assassin, and the other holds the little girl. Laverne assumes that the assassin killed the girl and that the neighbor killed the assassin. The neighbor nods. Laverne tells him she sent 2 assassins, but the neighbor replies that he only encountered one who tried to attack him. Laverne insists she did not send them to kill him, and asks if he did anything to provoke them. He admits he may have thrown a first punch. Laverne nods, saying she was only trying to help him by eliminating the witness. He thanks her. Laverne then reveals that she looked into Aurora's parents and discovered they were foster parents, something the neighbor already knew. He asks about Aurora's biological parents. Laverne explains that they abandoned her when she was young and urges him to see the pattern, suggesting that Aurora herself is the monster. She also warns him to be careful, since the men he took down in Chinatown were part of a Chinese syndicate, and now they want revenge. At that moment, Aurora approaches the neighbor. He scolds her for leaving the apartment. Aurora tells him she didn't think he was going to come back. Laverne invites Aurora to sit beside her, but Aurora chooses to sit next to the neighbor instead. She asks him, "You were going to leave me, weren't you?" He replies that he never promised to stay. Aurora points out that she hired him and he took her money. Laverne cuts in sharply, telling Aurora that in some cultures children are not considered people and ordering her to be quiet. Then she tells the neighbor that it's probably his unresolved childhood trauma, causing him to play savior to this little girl. Laverne looks at Aurora and asks what she meant by hiring him. The neighbor steps in, explaining that Aurora hired him to kill the monster under her bed and that her biological parents were eaten by it as well. Laverne dismisses the story as nonsense. Aurora insists that the girl who crawled in through her window was eaten too. The neighbor clarifies that it was the second assassin. Laverne warns Aurora that if she wants to live, she should leave this place immediately, or she will be killed. Later, the neighbor takes Aurora to a restaurant in Chinatown. From a distance, a man watches them closely. Aurora asks the neighbor to be her father. He refuses, pointing out that none of her previous fathers are alive. He tells her that they don't truly know each other and that what she thinks she wants from him isn't real. It's simply what her mind is convincing her to believe. He explains that he once believed his mother was beautiful, even though she wasn't. That was just what his mind chose to see. Just then, the man who has been watching them approaches their table. He asks the neighbor if the girl is his daughter. The neighbor answers no at the same moment Aurora says yes. The man calmly warns the neighbor that even if she has a daughter, it will not change what is about to happen. They leave the restaurant, but the man and his henchmen follow closely behind. Later, Brenda visits Aurora's apartment at the neighbor's request. He apologizes for refusing her appointment earlier that morning. Aurora immediately warns Brenda not to touch the floor, but the neighbor tells Brenda to ignore her, explaining that Aurora believes a monster ate her entire family. He then closes the door. Aurora retreats to her bedroom and crawls beneath the special blanket the neighbor made for her. Meanwhile, the neighbor warns Brenda that they are all going to die. He explains that Aurora's family didn't simply disappear without a trace. He admits that he is actually Aurora's neighbor, not her guardian, as he had claimed. He says he lied because he panicked when Brenda rang the doorbell after Aurora told him about a monster eating her parents. He tells Brenda that Aurora truly believes there is a monster, but he doesn't think she's lying. He believes she may be delusional. He urges Brenda to call someone for help, warning her that the monster Aurora described has followed her home. Brenda contacts her associate and tells him to get the team inside. The doorbell rings. The neighbor opens the door to find Laverne standing there. She scolds him and tells him to leave, pointing out that half a dozen men downstairs are waiting to kill him. He calmly tells her not to worry, revealing that the FBI is inside the apartment calling in reinforcements, and that he is simply a concerned neighbor from 5B. Laverne laughs at him. He insists that he has carefully planned this, framing the Chinese crime syndicate as suspects in the murders of Aurora's families so he can finally escape them. Laverne argues that the little girl still has to die. He gently kisses her hand and returns to the apartment. He tells Brenda that the visitor was just a worried neighbor. Brenda then admits she is with the FBI and has been investigating the disappearance of Aurora's families for some time. The neighbor pretends to be surprised. Brenda then explains that one strange clue was found at Aurora's birth parents' home: an open bottle of thumb-sucking deterrent on her nightstand. Someone had been applying it to Aurora's fingers before they vanished, along with the applicator brush. The brush was later found under the floorboard beneath Aurora's bed. The neighbor suggests that perhaps the monster spit the brush out, since it was a deterrent after all. Suddenly, they hear gunshots. They rush into Aurora's room, where she screams at them to get off the floor. They obey immediately. The neighbor tells her to stay in her room. They move toward the front door as armed members of the Chinese gang burst in, firing wildly. Brenda is hit and collapses. The neighbor drags her to safety. He realizes that Brenda's gun has run out of bullets, so he searches her for a spare magazine and is shocked to discover that she is still alive. Outside, the men push further into the apartment. In the bathroom, the neighbor hears a deep growl beneath the floor. He steps off the floor and urgently tells Brenda to do the same. As the gang members approach Aurora's bedroom, they are confronted by the monster itself. The men open fire in panic. Amid the chaos, the neighbor rummages through a drawer and finds the thumb-sucking deterrent, quickly pocketing it. Moments later, one of the attackers is violently thrown into the bathroom. Brenda finishes him off. The remaining men, now fully aware of the monster, try to avoid touching the floor by clinging to the walls. Despite this, one of them drops his weapon and tries to retrieve it, only to be instantly dragged beneath the floor and eaten. Back in the bathroom, the neighbor and Brenda shove the dead body out into the hallway, where it is immediately consumed by the monster. At that moment, FBI agents storm the apartment and order everyone to get down on the floor. The survivors desperately explain that they can't, but the agents refuse to listen. As the FBI moves toward the bathroom, Brenda identifies the neighbor as the concerned neighbor. Minutes later, the agents step back into the hallway. Brenda urgently warns them to get off the floor, insisting that something is inside it. Then one by one, they are all devoured. Amid the chaos, the neighbor manages to survive and calls out to Aurora, telling her to get ready, because they are going to escape through the fire escape. But before he can reach her bed, the monster pulls him under the floor. The next morning, Aurora wakes up to find the neighbor crawling back out of the floorboards, saved by the thumb-sucking deterrent. At that moment, Laverne enters the apartment, intending to kill Aurora. The neighbor urgently tells her, "Mom, get off the floor." Laverne snaps at him, furious, telling him not to call her that. Moments later, she too is dragged under and eaten by the monster. The neighbor and Aurora prepare to leave, but the monster blocks their path. It becomes clear that the creature never truly wanted to eat Aurora. The neighbor realizes the truth and tells her that the monster belongs to her. She wished for it, and now she must live with it. Aurora nods in understanding. Together, they leave the apartment, the monster following silently behind them, lingering in the shadows.